I guess first we should just mention that we're recording. Yeah, like where are we again?
Oh, we're at the offices of One Method as part of the Combine, which is like a shared creative space.
Got a couple 3 speeds going on again.
Got a couple 3 speeds going on from Amsterdam Brewery. You've got a double, or what's going on over there, Ray?
Medium black.
Medium.
So,
oof. I know, no milk for me either.
That's it. Keep it straight.
Yeah.
Fog lifter.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I know we're in the old CBC CBC studios.
Yeah, it's great.
Who could have been in here beforehand?
Yeah.
Who?
Gordon Lightfoot.
Ooh.
Oh, that'd be pretty sweet.
Who would you wish that was here before? Was it Gordon Lightfoot?
Maybe. Who would be a good iconic? Maybe the cast of the Rush and Geddy Lee.
That'd be cool. Neil Peart
in here. Yeah.
Oh, I like that. That's good.
Yeah, like circa 1980.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Oh.
Yeah, with the full-on hair and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Iconic Canadians. Everybody says something different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
It's great.
Although one of my Canadian folk heroes is I have eclectic sort of music taste, and is a guy called Stan Rogers, and I think he did some CBC recordings, and he died way too young in saving people from an airplane crash actually that he was on, and he wrote some amazing music before he was even 30, and it would have been pretty incredible to see what he would have been able to produce if he just carried on. But
yeah, absolutely.
Aside.
Yeah. So Ray, how best did you get into the fly fishing world then? How long have you been fly fishing for?
That's a good question. It's funny. One of my side projects of the last month or so has been my dad. My dad is a prolific videographer back in the day. I guess it would have been filmographer with Super 8 and 8mm film. He shot a lot of movies before I was born, and my sister was born, and then obviously when we were born and afterwards, up until I guess it kind of that film sort of thing petered out. So one of the things I've been doing recently is digitizing a lot of that old film and looking at some of the stuff. And it's funny, I'm looking at stuff just the other week, and I was probably not even able to stand, but my dad had a fishing rod in my hand up on a dock in Halliburton, and most of a lot of the stuff that I had of the early film video of me was with a fishing rod in my hand somewhere on a lake, and it's I just stopped to think that I don't even realize having a memory of life without fishing being involved in my life somehow. So
wow.
Yeah, it's kind of just a little bit of an aside, but the fishing and fly fishing aspect of it, I guess it kind of breaks down into my mother's side of the family and my father. So my father, I would never kind of classify my father as an angler, but he got me into fishing. He got me into the outdoors, and it's just kind of funny how things change and evolve, especially in the city. I'm from Toronto. My dad was born and raised in Toronto off the Danforth in the late 30s, early 40s, and he grew up fishing in the Don River. Swimming in the Don River, hunting rabbits with a .22, not too far from where we sit now, and that's not
so cool.
It's crazy. That's not a lot of years ago, right?
Yeah, really, in the Don Valley.
Yeah, I mean, how about being a 12-year-old walking around with a .22 rifle over your shoulder and a couple rabbits,
Yeah, exactly.
And
crawling out of the Don Valley.
And it's really truly not that long ago. I mean, it's probably since probably the late 40s or something like that. So it's not that long ago. Goes to talk about how things have changed, not only sort of culturally, but also just of access and population booms and all the other things that anglers, especially in urban areas, have issues with.
Yeah.
The fly fishing aspect of it, my mother was born and raised in Scotland, immigrated here, married my dad. But I have a lot more relatives and family over in Scotland. So even as a young kid, we used to go spend a lot of my summers back in Scotland, and I even lived there for a little bit. So my mom came from a small coal mining village along the Clyde side, and basically had to hop over the back fence and walk across a farmer's field. And I was either into pike ponds or trout streams along the Clyde and the Avon.
What?
So you
Yeah.
were bred to be a fly fisher.
Yeah, I
ridiculous.
guess so.
I think Scotland's been the theme of the last couple of
Has it?
podcasts. Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, we just had someone on
Ian
Ian
Troop.
Troop yesterday, and he was
Okay.
talking about Scotland as well. And actually, my girlfriend just moved to Scotland for the year to do school, and I've been thinking about going over and visiting and doing some fishing. But
You
it's like-
should. You
yeah.
should. Yeah. So, I mean, my uncles, my cousins, a lot of my relatives over there, my uncles' friends and stuff like that, it was all sort of, although I wouldn't say it was a fishing culture per se that I came from, it was just part of the country rural life,
Yeah.
right? So I did do some coarse fishing for carp in lakes, and I did do some pike fishing in some of the locks and that, but pretty much the great majority of my fishing I did over there was fly fishing for trout, and to some extent salmon and sea trout.
Yeah.
So that's that sort of aspect. I mean,
awesome.
it's just one of those cultures. I mean, things are changing and evolving, but it's just one of those cultures where, fly fishing is just like when you say you go fishing, you're talking about going fly fishing. It's like
Right.
it's like being out in New Brunswick or in Nova Scotia or parts of Quebec. Or like being to some extent in northern BC and stuff like that when you're talking about, either Atlantic salmon or steelhead fishing, or like, being down I was just down in the Catskills this spring, down in around Roscoe and fishing the Delaware and that too. And it's just, I love those places. There's a number of places in Pennsylvania, Michigan like that, where you're just in those areas, and it's not, when you talk about fishing, it's just understood that you're talking about fly fishing, and that's
Yeah.
the culture. And
that's just it.
it's just nice to
So
be
I'm
there.
going to plead beginner level right now. You said sea trout. I mean, I can kind of deduce what you're talking about, but
Oh God.
but tell me, what do you mean by sea trout? Like
So-
anything that sort of spawns and comes back, or like steelhead?
So when you're in Britain, when you say sea trout, you're talking about sea run brown trout.
Oh, right.
Okay, so but if you were in the east coast of, and then it can take on, if you're in the east coast of Canada, when you're talking about sea trout, you're talking about sea run brook trout usually.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I knew that. Just for those beginners out there,
Yeah,
guys.
no, it's all right. Yeah, it's all right, and
Yeah, it's great.
they get some pretty big ones down there too.
God, I imagine so. Yeah, we were. What about the fish in the locks for brown trout? Ian was saying yesterday that these brown trout are like the most amazing brown trout. Like they're amazing native brown trout that are just insane to catch in these lakes.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, and it's like all different. This is one thing I love about fly fishing too, is that it's so multidimensional. Like you can get into the the bug side of things, the entomology side of all that sort of stuff. You can get into rod building and line building. You can get into just simply straight fly tying, and you can get obviously into river fishing and adjuramus fishing and all that sort of stuff. And the lock fishing on its own has its own personality, right? It has its own understanding. It's not.
It has its own gear.
Yeah,
its
I mean,
own
when you think
boats.
about lake fishing over here, you're usually thinking about structure and points and drop offs and weed lines and all that sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
usually when you're lock fishing over there, there's not a lot of weeds. Generally, and a lot of times you're fishing open water, so you're fishing wind currents and patterns and stuff like that, of how insects are being on the surface, and it depends on how you're fishing. You're fishing dry or you're fishing down deep, and it's just a lot of the times they'll either paddle or motor up to the top side of the lake and drift down across it. So it's learning how to drift properly,
Yeah.
and understanding what you're doing, and a lot of times there's probably two people in a boat, so it's learning how to alternate your
Coordinate.
cast so you don't hang up, and it's windy and all that other fun stuff that
Crazy.
goes with fly fishing, right? So it's
Yeah.
all those little nuances that come with understanding every aspect of fly fishing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Scotland, where does that fit into your fly fishing journey and timeline wise?
So that's sort of my life. It's sort of like pre-marriage and kids, right? That's like pre-mortgage, marriage, and kids, right? So all that sort of stuff is. Although I can't say enough about how amazing it is to be a husband and a father to two great kids. Before that, we had a bit more free time and doing stuff like that. So, like I said, I used to spend a lot of either my summers, or I lived there for a little while, worked there for a while, and got to travel around. I was lucky enough to be able to fish from the chalk streams of southern England to probably some of the most northerly Atlantic salmon rivers in the north of Scotland, and locks and stuff like that up there. So
That's awesome.
at the time I appreciated it, but even looking back at it now, even more so, you dwell on some of that stuff and think of how lucky and fortunate you were. And just,
Yeah.
Well, you say you were. I mean, have you been back since?
I haven't
since
been back.
Mortgage Ray.
Yeah, I've been back a few times, but not with the free time
Right.
or that stuff to do it. And it's life gets in the way of things sometimes too, right? So
Yeah.
but it's a pretty amazing country. It's there's a few places around the world that I feel at home, and that's definitely one of them. Although I'm a very proud Canadian, it's one of the places I definitely feel just at home.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I remember, like, I think the first time I ever became aware of the chalk streams or whatever was like, you guys remember Oliver Edwards when he
Yeah.
put out all those like DVDs or whatever?
Yeah.
We would, like
Yeah.
had them on like repeat at Green Drake or whatever.
Yeah,
and I was
yeah.
just something I'm like, wow, this place looks amazing. These trout are amazing, and it's such a unique fishery. It's so clear.
Yeah, he did some amazing stuff. Although it's weird because some of that stuff, as you find out in life, it can be a bit of an optical illusion too, right? So some of that stuff that's going on in the south of England and the chalk streams and that is pretty pure, wild, really, unadulterated sort of cool stuff, and and some of that stuff is basically a moving trout pond, right, where it's although it's very manicured, and all of it's pretty manicured, but it's very much a put and take fishery. You're not dealing with wild fish, you're dealing with stock fish that are just come out of hatcheries and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's it's to each his own. I don't try to judge anything as long as you're doing it legally and ethically. It's cool,
Yeah.
but it's
Yep.
and it's very expensive. I was looking at
Right.
it was fairly expensive the last time I did it, and that's been a number of years ago. And I was just talking to a friend of mine over the summer about that, and I looked online for some of the prices, and it's just like, you talk about Atlantic salmon fishing, some of that stuff down in there, especially you talk about the itch and some of the name of the water on the test, and that you're talking 250 pounds a day, and that, which is
It's pretty pricey.
Mom pajama.
Yeah.
And that's no guide, right? Or is that
no,
guided?
that's no guide.
That's just a
you-
fish.
That's just a beat, right?
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
got your beat can be anywhere from a couple hundred yards to maybe a kilometer or two, or you have carriers, or you might have only right bank access, not left bank access, and
Wow.
Yeah.
So regulated
Yeah.
and maintained. But that makes for really good fishing, right? Like,
it can, but it can. It's one of those things. If you we want to get into this discussion of
It's
like,
exclusive,
if-
really.
of public access versus
Yeah.
private access.
Yeah.
There's, I guess, you could argue that there's pros and cons to each.
Of course, yeah.
You just have to go down to the Credit River in Arundel in October to find out some of the cons too.
Public
Yeah.
access?
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say so, yeah.
But
Seriously.
Yeah.
but yeah, you always it's the balance, right?
And a spoon flying by your ear. And you're like, I'm just might go home.
Yeah.
Put a rock over there. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, but yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah, because I've just been thinking about the regulations and stuff lately, and salmon season's upon us now, so of course it starts to go through the mind, and how they do it over there is so interesting. It costs so much money, and yeah, I just wonder if that's like a good way to do it.
But it's like anything else, though. I think if you're focused enough, you're wily enough, and you can put your mind to it. And there's other places over there you can, whether it's trout fishing or whether it's salmon fishing, you can, if you put in the time, the effort, and the sort of recon into runs and rivers and that, you can get onto some pretty decent water for not crazy amount of money.
Yeah.
And if you work on your craft and try to read water and cast better and fish better and all that sort of stuff, you start up in your odds, right? So I don't. That's an aspect of it too, right? And it's not guaranteed just because you go to the you go to the D in May, or you go to the Tay or the Tweed and the Junction Pool and the Tweed in October, doesn't mean you're going to limit out either, right? You could have
Right.
really poor conditions or poor runs and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
So
Yeah. So when did you start like learning about the credit and start learning about Southern Ontario fly fishing?
again through my father. So we would always, although I was born and raised in the city, we pretty much almost every weekend, more or less every weekend, at least during decent weather months, we would get in the car on a Saturday morning or a Friday night, and we'd either go somewhere camping for the weekend, or we'd get in the car on a Saturday and we just drive somewhere would just be, where do you want to go? East, west, north? Where do you want to go? So we just get in the car and drive. And usually, I mean, my dad or I would be throwing at least a rod in the car, and strangely enough, we'd always end up somewhere kind of close to water. So if it wasn't fishing, the Grand River in Cambridge for pike or bass or something like that, we're out in Belleville or Trenton or up in up north of the Kawarthas or Halliburton or somewhere around. So it's just did it sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's amazing. Like, it's always interesting to hear people sort of get into fly fishing down here, and like you said, you could just go northeast, west, south, whatever, and you can find water basically.
Yeah. So a lot of times, like, when trout season would open, I'm kind of aging myself, but my dad we'd drive out to Wilmot Creek. We'd park on the side of the 401, and you'd walk down, and it'd be a whole bunch of people, and you get you get an experience of public fishing for steelhead, and it's an enjoy. And then we'd fish there for a bit, then we'd move on to Port Hope, and then sometimes we'd go up to the Forks of the Credit or fish there. And a lot of times, being from the east end of the city, once I turned 16 and got my license, after school, it was an easy jump right up to Upper Duffins or the Rouge River or Bowmanville Creek or anything, Soapers or anything like that, and fish for resident trout up there. And as we mentioned sort of earlier, the changes that have gone on, and you have to deal with as being an urban angler, that it used to take me probably less than like 45 minutes to get to the Forks of the Credit, and now it's probably going to take me at minimum an hour and change, and if there's traffic, it might even take me 2 hours to get to the Forks of the Credit from the east end of the city, right? And whereas I could jump in the car and be up in Upper Duffins fishing for wild trout up in there, it's going to take me a lot more time. And not only that, when you get there, some of the land that they used to have no problem with you having access to, or now it's not posted. And then if you get there, sometimes too, there's several people there, and it's all those things that kind of compile up. So there's still some amazing fishing to take place, and there's still a lot more going on.
Oh yeah.
But it's it gets tougher and tougher all the time.
Never really thought of that because I live in Parkdale, right? And I'm like right by the Jameson on ramp for the Gardner, and so for me it's like really easy to get to. I've like basically, I think just because of that reason, I fish the eastern tribs less than I do the
it's like 40 minutes.
The western, yeah. For me in good traffic, I get to the fork. I get to the Forks in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I rarely fish Duffins and the east.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a city usually just to get divided, that dividing line down Yonge Street.
Down Yonge Street,
absolutely.
If you're from the east end of Yonge Street, you ought to fish a lot of the eastern tribs, and if you're west side of Yonge Street, it's like you fish like the Humber, the Credit, and everything else going out that way.
Yeah.
Ponty.
Well, your passion for fly fishing, it sounds like, in fishing, just the outdoors, seems to have taken you some pretty interesting places, and it manifested into a career.
Yes. So
teach us.
Yeah. How?
Mold us.
How did you do?
Please.
How did you find yourself getting down that road?
Yeah, it was pretty easy. I got a degree in political science and started working in an outdoor magazine.
Me too.
Hey.
Is that what you have a degree in?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Sociology. Yeah.
Oh, wow, no way.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
2 majors.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I remember my graduation day, and my dad said, come up with the diploma. My dad said, "Congratulations, that and $1.25 will get you a cup of coffee, right?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually got into Ontario Outdoors through being sort of the webmaster at the time, right? So not a web editor, but the webmaster, then became web editor. And then I did a lot of the digital stuff for Ontario Outdoors for a number of years, and then I worked my way up to associate editor. And then now I'm managing editor. So yeah,
awesome.
Do you find it taking you places cool? Like, do you get to go on trips and stuff, like in the name of fishing?
Yeah. So it's not as exotic as sometimes people might think that you're. Everyone goes, "Oh, you must be out hunting and fishing, every day of the week." No, I actually have work to do in a magazine to put together and editors to chastise and all that sort of stuff. But, you get to go up. We get to go around. We're Canada's best right outdoor magazine, but we're Ontario based. So we have the population here, we have the focus here, and we do cover stuff outside of Ontario, but most of it's here. So You know, a couple years ago, we were up fishing the Nipigon section with our senior editor, Gord Ellis, lives out of Thunder Bay, and he's just...
Nipigon keeps coming up.
Yeah, he's
Anyway,
just
we can
a
go back to
trophy.
that.
He's just a trophy brook trout magnet, and we went out with a number of our editors and field staff there, and Gord was able to put me on to my first coaster brookie. So that was nice.
Jesus.
Yeah, I thought I hooked into the bottom, and it just then you just still start feeling those head shakes, those pumps, and you're like,
man.
Oh.
And that was a bucket list sort of thing. Not only to get a Nipigon brookie, to my first fish was a coaster, and then got several after that up further up in the river and up towards the lake, and we get to do that stuff. I've done some hunts, being on Terre de Doors. We're both a hunting and fishing magazine, so I've done some hunts in Manitoba for wildfowl. I've done a bunch of stuff in southern Ontario, and generally get to go to trade shows. So I go to the SHOT Show usually every year, which is the hunting trade show aspect of things in Las Vegas, and then there's ICAST IFTD, usually in July, so every year, so I get to go to that.
ICAST is pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, like I've heard,
or it's intrigued me.
I've heard it, but it intrigued me too. Like, but I've never really gotten. Well, you just went down, right?
Yeah, I just was in July. Yeah, just a few months ago.
Whereabouts was it again?
So it's been in Orlando for the last number of years. It has been in Vegas and stuff like that before. So ICAST is the conventional tackle side of things, and IFTD is the fly fishing, International Fly Fishing Trade Show. I think I got it. Side of things. So they sort of they were separate for a number of years, and they sort of combined the shows. It's a trade show. It's not a open to public show. So it's a trade show of everybody showing the new gear and what's going on and that sort of stuff. And for the last number of years, it's been exciting because I get to kind of combine those two.
Oh yeah,
two fields of study. But it's really interesting. It's not only just seeing new gear and having to touch and feel things. You get to you get kind of a little bit of head start on some trends and things that are going on. But you get to talk to a lot of people down there. So everybody's pretty open and accessible. Just having chats with Simon Gosworth from Rio about line development and stuff like that, right? And then a couple of years ago, I was down there and they have a fly casting pond, and everybody gets to try out some new rods, what's new from Sage and all that sort of stuff. And Tim and Steve Rajeff were down there. So Steve with Loomis and Tim with Echo and Airflow, and they're just talking. And then they just pull out 4 weights and they start having a casting competition between the two brothers, right?
It's pretty cool.
And they start like unloading, full like factory rods, factory lines. They just start unloading 4 weights and 40 feet of backing from, and they just have a little brotherly competition.
Yeah, seriously.
And they're going, okay.
That's insane.
You can really use those cats on the credit there.
Yeah.
But you get to find, and it's a small world when you start talking about people. Usually you mention something and somebody knows somebody else, and pretty much most people involved in it are pretty good people, pretty decent people, because because it's such a small world and such a small industry.
Yeah, you have to be.
Some of the riffraff get weeded out.
Yeah,
for sure.
Good. So it's made a lot of good friendships through it, and it's just some really nice people.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. We talk about rod building as well, because I know you build rods as well, right?
Yeah, so that sort of kind of creeps back in. I've got back into it a little bit, but that kind of works into a little bit pre-mortgage and wifing sort of stuff, right? Okay. So it's kind of like, I know this is radio, but it's like one of those graphs of the stock market when it hits the 30s or something like that. So it's kind of going up, and rod production is happening, and everything's going on, and you're buying stuff and creating things and pumping out as many rods as you can a year, and then sort of life takes its place. So I used to build probably, I don't know how many rods a year.
So it was more than a hobby. It was a business.
I wouldn't say it was a business, but I did sell rods. But it was more of a side. It was more of a side thing doing it.
Gotcha.
And that was sort of like the junkie feeding his needs. It was more money, selling rods to get more money to buy more components, buy more bamboo, buy more tools, and all that sort of stuff, right?
So what got you into building rods in the first place?
So it's kind of a weird and convoluted. I used to fish a lot with Joe Amaral, who's been on the show, and Roy DeGiusti, and Ramsey McDonald and Vasily Ketcharouas, who was on here too, right? So Joe, I guess the nucleus of it was Joe being an art director. Was very taken by, I mean, he'd been fly fishing for a number of years and got really taken with sort of bamboo rods. And I guess to most of us, it was kind of like bamboo rods are kind of cool, but it was kind of like old technology and kind of like, you know, putting on an old suit or driving around in a 57 Chevy, right? It's kind of cool, but, you know, and it's kind of nice to look at, but I don't really want to do it, right? So Joe kind of got into it. And
I kind of want a 57 Chevy. Well, I was going to stop you right there.
Except when it breaks down and you have to like fix it out and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So Joe bought a rod, a bamboo fly rod, and started fishing it for a while. And we were like, yeah, that's kind of you know, it's hey, you know, everybody would cast it and fish with it a little bit and stuff like that. And say, yeah, this is kind of cooler than we thought it was, right? And then you start doing more research into it and play around and talking to people.
Yeah, because it feels so different, you know.
It
like
does.
a bamboo rod just casts different.
It does, and it's made for trout fishing. Now I know there's a lot of great guys out there doing another great Toronto bamboo rod builder, George Carcao. He's caught sailfish on it, so you can build them, do crazy stuff. And I know there's a lot of stuff go with like James Reed out in the West Coast and Bob Clay and stuff like that. They're doing some pretty great things with double-handed rods and stuff like that. But to me, you know, bamboo rods were made for that sort of 6.5 to 7.5 foot 3 to 5 weight, and if anything in that thing, it's butter, right? So we started you know, thinking about it, and Roy and I started talking about building some, and Joe as well. And then it's kind of like, well, maybe we should buy some. And then it's like, oh, you know, some of that stuff is like even back in the late 80s, early 90s, or, you know, $1,200 and stuff like that. And it's kind of, I mean, you look at a double-handed rod now, it's probably pretty much equivalent, but it's still a lot. But then it's kind of like fly tying, right? Why would you buy a couple dozen flies for this amount of money? When you could buy the tying material and all this sort of stuff, and then you end up spending way more money on fly tying
material than you ever would have on the flies.
It keeps on feeding the
and you
addiction.
get a desk, and then you get a room.
So that's the thing with bamboo rod building, and that's with a lot of things in fly fishing, right? It can be as simple as you want it to be, right? Or it can be as complex and evolved as you want it to be, right? So we were thinking, okay, well, you just have to buy a couple columns of bamboo. You have to buy like a plane and a blade, and you need a bamboo form to kind of, you know, taper the bamboo, and you need to glue it up. So there's not a lot of expenses in it. And there isn't, right, if you want to keep it simple. But then you start doing that, and they start saying, well, if you buy just a simple beveler, that will cut down on, you know, a lot of the time and effort you have to put into it, right? And then if you just buy this, you can do this, right? If you just buy that, you can do this, right? And
then you've got a garage workshop,
and you start
like,
go, whoa, how'd that happen, right?
And then if we move out of the city and get a double garage,
you got raised rods on the front of your thing.
Yeah, so Blades, it was Roy's last name is DeGiusti, so it was Blades and DeGiusti for the longest time.
Awesome, yeah.
Yeah, so it was a great journey. So I just actually finished off 3 rods over the spring, and that's the first 3 rods I've done for a few years. But it's getting back into it, and it's starting to flame and split some columns again and get back into it. But and then like I said about the different facets and aspects of fly fishing. You know, at first I thought, you know, bamboo rods are all slow and sloppy and noodles and stuff like that. Then you start getting into it and find, and some, you know, rightfully so, some of that stuff is. And some of those are really cheap rods that were made in the 50s and mass produced, and they're not really great fishing tools. But then if you start looking at people like, you know, Dickerson, for me, most of my influence comes from Michigan. So Paul Young and Dickerson, and those guys back in the 50s were building trout rods that are just mind-boggling today. I mean, just their actions, their feel, what they can do. Yeah. They're not clubby, they're not noodly, they're just sweet pieces of art. And I just love building them because, like you say, it's a completely different feel. It's a completely different feel casting. It's a completely different feel mending. It's a completely different feel when you hook set, and it's a completely different feel when you're fighting a fish. There's nothing like it for me. There's nothing like it for trout fishing.
Yeah, especially like just the innate experience, like you were saying with a nice car. It's sort of similar, right? Like it's something about fishing bamboo for trout that's just kind of feels good.
Mitch fishes bamboo.
Well, I've got one of Joe's rods, and
nice.
And when he first gave it to me too, I was kind of just like, it was sort of a similar thing where it's just like, this is cool, but I was like, I had no idea what the hell the difference was, and then I casted it, and it did feel very different. And it was just like, that's cool, you know, and it's like I've always fished for trout with it, just because I think, well, for that experience, I think having a trout fishing rod that's bamboo just feels cool, you know. But totally like casting between that and then you go to like a graphite rod with such fast action, and you're just like, Jesus, like so different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's just material, right? So it's
Right.
And it's everything in life can be, I guess, justified if you want, like having a new rod every year or something like that. But
Yeah, we managed to pull that off.
yes, strangely enough, we do, don't we?
Yeah.
But I can see some sort of technical aspects of high modulus modern graphite and what it can do. But in most trout fishing situations where you're fishing streams that are no wider than an average city street wide, there's not really anything or even a lot that bamboo can't do in those situations that the high modulus modern graphite can do. Now you start talking about fishing the flats in Florida in high gust of winds and 70+ foot casts to tailing bonefish and stuff like that, then you start talking about different stories, right? And then so that isn't always the norm, but it's an application, right?
Yeah.
And you start talking about I don't know, casting big musky flies and stuff like that. The fly fishing trend of musky fishing with flies has been, over the last number of years growing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I've done it with sort of some Paul Young larger rods and stuff like that. But I will admit, after you've casting an 8.5, 9 foot, 8 or 9 weight for half of a day bamboo rod, it starts to wear on you, right? So there's justifications for that, and even getting into some of the spey rods and switch rods, to each his own. If you want to fish a bamboo rod that way, fantastic. But what's going on with a lot of the rod technology for that sort of 10, 11 foot, 5, 6, 7 weight, what's going on in graphite, it's pretty hard to beat just the lightness and the performance and what you can get out of it for all day fishing. Yeah, so it's like a lot of things, right? It's to each his own. Whatever floats your boat, it's good for you.
Yeah.
Bringing up the musky thing, you've done a lot of musky fishing, or I was reading your blog.
Yeah.
Which, funny enough, is called the
SoFly.
Elephant in the room.
Yeah. SoFly blog.
That's awesome.
It's weird, and I didn't even know it until you guys came up when we initially talked about doing this. I'm like, okay, so I have to go look back at the patent or what sort of copyright, right? And I look back, and I think you guys beat me by like 3 months or so.
Oh, did we?
Putting it out.
Oh, sick! Right on.
Oh, thank God.
I didn't know. I thought you beat us.
Yeah.
I remember Joe was like, "Oh yeah, Ray's got a thing called SoFly." I'm like, "Cool."
Uh-oh. How does this episode end? It ends with us getting sued.
Yeah. My lawyers can talk to your lawyer.
Call Gab.
Yeah. So, how much is half of nothing?
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much.
You can have half of the rest of this beer.
I still got a little coffee left.
But yeah, I think Yilma and I were checking out your blog today, and musky fishing came up, and I went up for musky for the first time this year. We went up to Attawapiskat. We weren't musky fishing, but we were using musky gear and stuff. It's like that's a whole other world.
Yeah,
I've never fished like that before. It's really cool.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah,
I've done it on and off for a number of years. I'm nowhere as skilled or passionate as it is my good friend Vasily that's been on the show, but it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, he's dialed.
It's very he's been dialed in since I've met him many years ago, and it's just the thing I like about musky fishing and with a lot of other aspects of my fishing is it's very primitive, right? I don't mean that in a disparaging way. It's just you and the predator, right? It's just some hooks and flies and hooks and feathers and all just to cast it out there. I mean, there's a lot more subtlety to it too than that, right? I mean, just you think you're going to go out there and cast big flies all the time and hook fish. It's not the case. They can get turned off and as picky as some dry fly feeding brown trout at times, but when that sort of aspect to the fishing I really like about
I know exactly what you mean. I think we felt that every day just doing the big pike stuff too up north, because it was just like those fish were the biggest pike we've ever seen. Getting to fish those things with massive flies, it's just like it's kind of intimidating. Just because they're such monsters. Like they're eating like 12-inch flies. It's like, Jesus.
I remember getting a follow from a muskie.
Yeah.
And it turning away, and I'm like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? Because you grew up in the Ottawa area, and we fished pike a lot.
Right.
And I was so used to, just pike being so aggressive, and then so I went muskie fishing the first time, and it was like
It's really different.
It's really different.
Yeah.
So how so?
different.
Wait a minute.
Like the
Wait.
musky behavior.
Yeah.
So talk about the musky behavior, because I would like to know. I mean, considering they look similar to pike, but then like
They
how's
are an
it-
Esox.
Yeah.
right. So
Esox musculongi and Esox lucius, if I get my Latin anywhere close to proper pronunciation.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're a lot of fun. Like I've said, I've done it on and off over the years. It's not my passion, but I really enjoy doing it when I do it.
Yeah.
And
it's no brown.
yeah, I found the best thing about it was the last time I was doing with it's one of our writers and a local guide named JP Bushy. He was not really a fly angler, but he's just a musky head, right? And it was just
It really grips people's lives.
yeah. It's one of those fish and one of those activities.
Yeah.
It's like
It's
there's
like
no
steelhead.
Yeah.
and I'm maybe a little bit of the exception because I like to do it and I dabble in it a little bit, but usually it's pretty clear cut. It's either you're a musk angler or you're not a musk angler.
okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the one thing that resonated true to me last time I was out musky fishing with a fly was I was out with JP Bushy, one of our guides and good friend, and my other good friend Brian Slavinsky. And you have a good guide that knows what he's doing, whether he's a fly angler or not. Get out there on the water and put you into productive water, because it can be. I mean, if you're in smaller bodies of water, there's some of the rivers I fish for muskie and that, which was a bit different fishing for river muskie. But if you're in big water on Georgian Bay and stuff like that, it all looks good. And sometimes it can be all good, but a lot of times, you're fishing specific spots and locations and humps and repeating cycles. A lot of times we'd hit spots and we'd go back again because those spots are really productive. And if you're not hitting it now, after you've hit 4 or 5 spots after that, you cycle back to some of those things because fish could be up there then.
Yeah.
And it's just, and a lot of the times, a lot of the fishings, there weren't big, we fished a little bit of big flats and stuff like that, but a lot of times there's small humps or little reefs and stuff like that. And it's like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 casts, we're out, we're gone. Because if you're not catching anything on the 4th or 5th cast, you're probably more likely not catching anything. So it's that one, next one, right? And you have that buck.
Yeah.
You have those milk runs to do. I mean, every water body is going to be different, and especially fishing big water like Georgian Bay,
Yeah.
is probably different than a lot of other ones. But and it's just a great learning experience. That's one thing. I try to be. I am very much a specialist when it comes to fly fishing. There's a few things that I really like, and I really like to do a lot, and that's what I kind of stick to. But being a generalist and learning about different aspects of things, it also sort of opens your eyes up to, how you can approach things that you do like, and how you can take away sort of strategies and sort of other people's approaches to their sort of gig of how they do things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of cool too when you go down to something like the trade show down in Orlando, meeting all those people who they come from such different backgrounds. Because I remember you were talking about Simon Gosworth and these guys. It's pretty cool that you get to, like, just coming from a general standpoint, when you're so in the industry, like you can learn from such different people and really like explore it in that way.
Yeah, people who have like really specialized either because of where they're from or what they're interested in,
Yeah.
like going down to Florida for the first time was really cool for me, because again, you meet those people who are like just so in it. Like, I'm a tarpon guy.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's all they do.
Well, that's what I think of when I think
and
of
up here
Bill.
I'm like, I'll just do anything.
Yeah,
I don't know.
exactly.
Yeah, I think of Bill and I think like musky guy, and I think of like Joe and I think like trout guy, so it's cool when you find people that are sort of like fluid in what they like in the fly fishing world, because it's such a vast thing.
And extremely knowledgeable, right?
Yeah.
And extremely knowledgeable. Like, you go through things like that and you realize, you think you're the only person that's having this conundrum or solving this problem, and then you read into the books, the history books. I'm big on sort of fly fishing, giving props to the people that have come before us, but also the people that are here too, right? I mean, I've done it a number of times with Joe, especially, and just say, I'm trying to figure out this or do this and that, and he's just saying, well, have you tried this or do this or that, and it's because a lot of those times those guys are going through the same issues as you are, right? Whether it's figuring out a feeding rise or a hatch pattern or whatever it might be, or a casting stroke of how to get certain things down, and they they give their information pretty freely. So it's pretty nice to have that. And being down there with Simon Gosworth and Steve Rajeff and stuff like that, those guys are all really approachable too. Because you ask about rod design, why is this doing like that, or what's your thoughts behind designing a rod like this, or what's the trends within rods, or what's the trends within line design, and why you're doing this and that, right? And then you get a lot of instant feedback. So that stuff is it's really, really, just really rewarding. Really, the immediacy of it all too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I remember watching his how-to spay cast videos.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah, I know, they're so good.
Yeah.
One of the nicest guys you will ever meet too.
Yeah.
So giving of his time and his information, and just a true gentleman. I can't say enough nice things about Simon.
Yeah.
Way to go, Simon.
Way to go, Simon.
Way to go, Simon.
Maybe we'll have him on the show.
You mentioned, there are a few things that you really liked to do in the world of fly fishing, and your generalist in some other specific areas. What are those few things that you really enjoy about the sport? Like, what do you now really look forward to every, let's say, season?
So it would be steelhead trout fishing, steelhead fishing, Atlantic salmon fishing. I guess if I had to knock it out into maybe 4 fish, would be probably brown trout, Atlantic salmon, steelhead, and although I don't get to do it as much as I'd really like to, would be fishing for grailing. I just absolutely
that's that's Yelma's bucket list fish. Yeah.
They're just wow, one of the coolest fish in the world.
Yeah.
I just love them to death.
And is that because they're so amazingly beautiful once you catch them, or is it the fight? Is it the take? Like, what
I think it's a number of things. So one of the things, it's not a ubiquitous fish. It's not an obvious fish that's around and easy to catch. So it's sort of, I haven't, not to tell you the honest truth, I've never caught any in North America. All the grayling I've caught has been in Britain, but it's just that they're kind of, that sort of subculture fish.
Yeah.
They're how absolutely gorgeous they are. And that they also feed on dry flies like trout too. Although there can be a lot more involved and difficult to catch than brown trout, just because of how their mouth is positioning. But they can be just as selective as brown trout. So
you're matching the hatch with grayling as well?
Yeah. So I've fished a number of them with subsurface patterns, but I love fishing them with dry flies too. So and I haven't got to do as much of it as I'd like to, and I'd still love to do more and more of it. But but besides that, steelhead, Atlantic salmon, and brown trout.
Cool.
Very cool.
Very cool. Grayling, you got to do it, Yelma.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do it with you guys.
I want to do grayling too. I want.
Oh yeah, I mean, of course. But
I've heard their take is just like nothing. Like you almost set the hook every time you cast, just because you don't know if they're necessarily.
Yeah, it can be very tricky, especially when you're fishing dry flies, because they're because of the way their mouth position. Shouldn't be holding my hand up doing a podcast, but just because how their mouth.
Ray's holding his hand up right now.
Just because of how their mouth is positioned more towards the bottom of them, they just kind of usually sit back, or you just. I find you just have to, not like I'm an expert in dry fly fishing for grayling, but I just find that with brown trout it's usually take, slip, set the hook, whereas then with grayling I find it's a lot of more. Sip, take, 1, 2 hooks.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So sort of way to beat kind of thing. Yeah, it's an interesting world. Yeah, we've been thinking a lot. We've had grayling on the mind for the last year, quite a bit, because we're all
right.
wanting to do that. But
let's do a podcast from somewhere
from Plumbers
in Nunavut or something like that.
Yeah. We had Alex Ginther on a few episodes ago, and he guides at he's a guide at Plumbers Lodge and
Tree River.
He was talking about all the grayling they can. Just a plentiful up there.
Apparently it's ridiculous. He says he takes his clients there when they're kind of having a slow day, because he knows they'll get 40 fish.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, cool.
Great.
That sounds awesome.
All right, I can pack a generator and a sat phone, and we can do a podcast from there. We can.
Perfect.
We totally will, because that's an awesome idea.
Plumbers are coming for you.
We'll be there.
And they got the Arctic char if you go up to the tree.
That's what we wanted.
You can package the grayling. I mean, the Lakers on there is pretty cool. Those big rubbery,
crazy,
big
huge.
bulbous nose. They look like a sort of like a 1950s drunk man character.
Yeah, they do.
These big bulbous nose and these big wings for adipose for fins and adipose fins, and they just. But having those all together with grayling and getting into Arctic char,
that'd be a ridiculous.
Char would be fantastic.
And the char are insane looking.
Yeah,
I should, if I had to put throw a fifth or a 4A into that, would be the Arctic char.
But what about? So you're talking about your Atlantic salmon as well. So you said you fished Atlantic salmon in Scotland?
Yeah, I when I've lived over there, been back and forth a number of times as a kid. I've fished a fair amount of rivers from south central to northern Scotland for mostly for trout, because trout is just it's just usually a bit easier and more conducive and less costly to do than Atlantic salmon fishing. Like I said, if you put some time and effort into it and a little bit of research, there's some pretty decent salmon fishing you can have out there for not crazy amounts of money. So
Here you go, Mitch.
But
Yeah, I know. I gotta pick your brain on that a bit, because God, it'd be so cool.
yeah, I mean, I fished from the borders of the Tweed. I fished a number of beats on the Tweed, the Nith, the Annan, in the southern part of Scotland, towards the borders, from the Clyde up in through to the Brora and the Helmsdale in northern, and a little bit of stuff on the west coast as well. I haven't done too much on the Tay or the D. I haven't fished the D or the D or the Don or anything like that. But there's a bunch of other smaller rivers around there that they don't get a lot of names, and I mean, pretty much it's like pretty much any river that going into Lake Ontario gets a run of fish. So pretty much any river going into the ocean off of Scotland gets. And the only thing that would hamper that would be falls are not too much of an issue. It's more hydroelectric schemes and stuff like that. Have stopped some of the really good runs in some of those rivers. But besides that,
rough.
a lot of them are free flowing. Yeah, some pretty crazy stuff over there.
Yeah.
So I fished a little bit there for Atlantics, like I said, but mostly trout, just because it was just more conducive to that.
You fish the Gaspé over here? Or?
Fished the Gaspé a number of times. I haven't been that in the circuit of things for too long, for a number of years, just because other passions, like going out to BC and steelhead fishing a little bit there, but fished there, fished a number of the rivers in Gaspé, fished some stuff on the North Shore of the St. Lawrence, some of the Côte Nord rivers, or St. Marguerite, and some of that stuff.
That's another thing we got to do.
Yeah.
Pretty nice too. And then we used to go to the Marguerite every fall
Cool.
For a number of years back in the 90s, and that was when it was rocking pretty good. It's gone through its ups and downs like a lot of things as well too, but it just, the one thing about fly fishing and anadromous fish and trout fishing in general, it takes you to some beautiful places, right?
Yeah.
Although you can find some bridge pilings with graffiti on them, or fishing there. A lot of the times you're fishing in some pretty cool places.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you mentioned steelhead too, so
Yeah, so
steelheading out west. I mean, talk about beautiful places.
Some nice stuff. I grew up a Great Lakes steelheader. If I had to classify me as anything, although my sort of Scottish experiences sort of helped mold me into a fly angler, or started the nucleus of a fly angler. What really I guess I would classify myself as a Great Lakes steelheader / trout angler, right? Three-stone sort of trout angler.
Yep.
And grew up fishing all the drainages into the North Shore of on Lake Ontario, a little bit in New York State, and a little bit up in Georgian Bay, like Huron and stuff like that. I'll even up into Superior a little bit, although I haven't done too many trips up there as I'd like to. But yeah, so that sort of grows and evolves and itches, and saying, hey, you know what, it's be nice to go actually and fish for what some people might call real steelhead once in a while, and go out to BC. So
Great Lakes steelhead, though, there's something so special about them.
there is, and you know what? Try to have an open mind of everything I do, and especially in fly fishing. And I've had some just phenomenal, crazy fishing Great Lakes steelhead, where it's just you're just shaking your head how manic and amazing some of these fish are, and fights
Powerful.
are. Yeah, and I've caught fish that are like boots, right? And no disrespect to the fish, but you never know what they're gone through. Somebody might have caught that fish, 15 minutes, a half an hour before you caught it, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing with out in BC, had some just absolutely mind-blowing fish, either destroy dry flies or just rip rods out of your hands and stuff like that.
So cool.
But also we've caught fish out there where it's you just hook, grab, hook set, couple head shakes, a little bit of a run, and start reeling it in, right?
Yeah.
And some of those fish are probably close to 200 miles from the salt, so
cool.
you don't know what in some of that stuff. A lot of times you're on a dropping river, right? So you don't know how far that fish has ran that day or in the last week, right? So it's not.
Yeah, it's true.
I've had some amazing fights and some amazing experiences on either the coast of the Great Lakes or the coast of the West Coast, and it's you take every experience as its own, and every fish as its own beast, and it's just I don't look down upon Great Lakes fish at all, because I've had some just incredible experiences, but being out in BC and is pretty special as well too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You've probably caught a ton of steelhead, so this question might not work, but do you remember your first steelhead you ever caught?
Doesn't everyone?
I find they make an impression, you know? I mean, fish do, in general, your first fish, but it's like with steelhead, you know? But I mean, after probably hundreds.
Thousands.
Yeah,
thousands.
It would have been. It would have been in the. I don't know if we want to get into those stories, but it would have been back in the. It would have been in the Ganaraska, probably in the. Let me date myself here. Probably in the late 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, those were kind of interesting times, right? It's like it was. And they still go on now, but I mean, you know, I remember a number of times fishing in the Ganaraska on opening day. My dad would drive me down there. He would probably sleep in a car. He wasn't, like I said, although he
So he's an Aldo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Is he?
Oh yeah.
I mean,
this guy
sleeping in the back of the Jeep.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He sleeps in the back of Jeep. He does anything for a catch.
My dad's an up and goer and doer. He's not really much of a sleeper, but I mean, getting up at crazy o'clock in the morning to take your son fishing in the dark too. And like I said, although he got me deeply involved in the outdoors and being outdoors and into fishing and nurtured and did everything I wanted to do, take me anywhere I wanted to. For my 16th birthday, he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, you know, what do you want for your birthday? What do you want to do?" I said, "You know what? I'd love to go down to the Catskills and fish some of the fan water." That goes, "Okay,
yep.
Tell me where we're gonna go, and we're gonna go do it." And I said, "You know,
that's awesome.
That was pretty good." And you know, took me on my first fly-in fishing trip when I was a kid up north of Chapleau, when I was probably about 12 years old and stuff like that.
Man.
And this is coming from a guy that appreciates the outdoors and loved being outside, but I would never consider him, you know, an angler, right? He fishes with his grandkids off the dock with a worm and stuff like that, but he's not an angler. So getting back to it, he would take me out trout opener. We'd usually go to Wilmot Creek or the Ganaraska, and you would be there at whatever 3-4 o'clock in the morning well before sunrise, and you'd be trying to get your spot to fish. And I would try at times to fly fish in there or fish an indicator rig or something like that. And it's kind of a bit crazy. And then somebody would have a bonfire on the island and be drunk and fall into the pool with like 6 guys around you and stuff like that. So it was
70s, man.
Yeah, it was crazy, sort of, you know, urban. Although Port Hope isn't really urban, but I mean, it's still part of that sort of urban experience. And it's been an incredible journey. It's just part of my life and who it is, right? And it's just the urban experience of angling, especially being a fly angler, is fun and interesting. But I also very much, it's that sort of yin and yang. So when you're not in that environment, when you're out in the middle of nowhere in BC or in Quebec or wherever you happen to be in northern Scotland or whatever, I think you relish that stuff even more, right?
Yeah, I imagine, yeah.
The sound of silence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember being in Oregon steelheading, and there was like nobody there. And I was like, I've never been steelheading alone.
It feels a little bit weird too. Like
you're like,
I'm almost fishing during a closed season or something like that, right? Because it's like, why is nobody here? Is there something wrong? Like, the season's closed, or there's no fish around, or they've dammed the river and no fish have been up here for 80 years, and you're standing there. But yeah,
it's cool. Yeah. It's so true about the wilderness too. I mean, I think about it all the time because all the steelheading we do right now so far is down here in Southern Ontario, and it's very, like you say, an urban experience, right? Like you're next to the community center. Yeah, it's cool.
And people are trying to jump you, and not in a violent way, but I mean just in a like jump your spot and all that sort of stuff. And a number of times we'd fish.
Trying how to navigate the shopping cart in the middle of the
Yeah,
run. You're
the
like,
structure.
You're
Where
like,
did you catch
should I
that
use
fish?
an
The structure, yeah.
Yes.
They're hiding behind the shopping cart. Do
Yeah.
I use an intermediate line to get over it, or
Yeah.
should I use a dry line? So
Yeah. And like I said, for a number of years, we used to go out. I think we've mentioned before, Ramsey, my good friend Ramsey. We used to go out to fish the Margarita in the fall every year for a week or so, and we would start the season fishing here in the Great Lakes, fishing for salmon and early run steelhead, and then we'd go out there, and you'd be kind of coming from this environment, and then you'd be out there, and people would stop you on the street or just as you're gearing up or going down to the river, and somebody, some man and woman would be driving by, not fishing, but just locals, and they'd stop you and they'd roll down the window and they'd ask you some questions, right? And you get in this sort of Southern
happens.
Ontario mentality, like,
Still
what are you doing? Like, why are you asking me questions? What's going on?
know.
Like, what do you want from me and all this
Yeah.
stuff, right? And it takes you it took me almost like 3 or 4 days, maybe almost even up to a week to decompress and think, these people are just being nice people.
Yeah.
It's not that they're trying to get anything over on you
Yeah.
or pull anything.
Yeah.
It's just they're genuine, nice
Curious
people and
and
just
they're
wanted to
nice.
say hi.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. That's awesome.
Oh, no, it's what's wrong with me. Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's every time I go on vacation. When I go back home to Trinidad, I everybody's like waving and like, what the hell do they want from me?
They're just nice.
they're just saying hi.
nice.
They're just saying hi.
I'm probably like their cousin or something. It's
Yeah.
like, oh,
All right, it's time for some Mitchie's Fishies 5.
All right.
So it's just 5 questions that are sort of random, and I think of them usually off the top of my head.
There's a theme. There's usually a theme. There's usually a theme.
There's
yeah.
usually
The
a
theme is fish.
yeah.
And Mitch.
They're pretty.
and Mitch,
They're pretty
Mitch is
strict.
asking them.
They're pretty, and I'm asking
And
them.
5.
They're about fishing, and I'm asking them. There's 5 of them.
There's a theme. See.
So these questions are usually the ones we ask in Mitchie's Fishies, but they're just stripped back, meant to get some conversation going. So let's just start with the first one here. It's
Is it rapid fire or can I have
it's
any
not.
time?
You can take as long,
Take
as,
as long as you want.
That's the best
As
thing
short
about this
or
segment.
as long as you want.
The best thing about this segment is people are always like, "Is it rapid fire?" I'm just like, "No, there's really no rules." It's like, well, what's the point? There's nothing to it. It's just more questions.
Okay.
It has a cool name.
And has a cool name. Yeah,
It's a good way to kind of rein in the episode.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, so we've got the first one here. What is your favorite fish and why? So we've kind of talked a little bit about your favorite fish in terms of 4 or 5 of your favorite fish, but
Yeah.
if you had to pick one fish, number one fish, favorite one, what is it?
Desert island sort of fish, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. Like what fish
Like-
represents you,
Like
what is
Bob
your...
Marley Exodus album or something like that, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Wow. The answer could change on a daily basis and probably would, but if I had to go with it, it would more than likely be steelhead.
Yeah, steelhead.
Yeah.
There we go.
So why is that? Based on, apart from the obvious.
It's weird because sometimes they're the most complex fish to fish for, and sometimes they're the most basic and simplest fish to fish for, depending on what you're doing. I just love where they live. I love the times of year that you're fishing for them. I love the rivers they inhabit. I am completely a river fisherman, although I do fish lakes and I do enjoy the ambiance of lakes and just waking up with a calm, clear, flat lake and everything coming alive around it. For me, water generally has to be moving. I just love it when it wraps around your feet. It's all a very tactical sort of aspect of fishing. And then casting and swinging a fly to some extent is the most basic and simplest form of fishing for it. But again, it's a tactical grab, the tactile sort of,
Yes.
I keep on going back to those sort of same themes, but it's a lot of just that relationship that you have with the fish.
Yeah.
I could be in a lot of sense just a naturalist being out there in the wild in nature, but I have to have that interaction with fish. That's what connects me. That's what part of makes me a fisherman. And if I had to pick one on Mitchie's Fishes 5, I will go. My answer today is steelhead.
That's awesome.
Bing, number 1.
Okay, for number 3, what is your favorite fishing memory?
Yeah, so if I had to, like I said, I've had a few that would be in the top 3 or 5 there, but like I just mentioned. But if I had to pick one, it would be my dad and I, when I was probably about 12-ish or so, we went to a father and son flying fishing trip north of Chapleau, and we stayed up in a back lake up there for a week. And to be honest with you, the fishing wasn't that great, to be honest.
Oh no.
But it was just, it was just the simplicity of life. A week with your dad in a cabin that had bats flying around in it, eating bacon and eggs and French toast every morning
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds
for
nice.
breakfast. And we portaged into some back lakes. We found some brook trout creeks and did a bunch of different stuff. And it was just, I think, just the natural simplicity of everything just slowing down and just having some, being off the grid with your dad for a week and just doing some cool father and son stuff. It's always something that just stuck with me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. Love that story.
We got number 4, Mitchy's Fishy here.
Number 4.
Yeah.
Number 4.
We've asked this one a couple times to different people, but the question is, why do you fly fish? Now, this question can be interpreted different ways based on who you are and what you do, but yeah, why do you? Why fly fish? Not to come across as being, snobbishly fly fishing or anything like that. It's just part of who I am. It's just my identity. I can't, like I said before, I can't think of a time in my life with cognitive knowledge of the world without having fishing involved with it somehow. And fly fishing has just evolved into that. It's what I think about generally when I go to bed at night, and it's what I think of, it's what I wake up thinking about of different rivers I've been fishing on over the evening, and it's thinking about fly patterns during the day and thinking about strategies and what's the next fish you're gonna try to catch, what's the next fly you're gonna tie, where's the next place you're gonna go to, what's the next excuse you can give your wife for Yeah.
not cutting the grass.
Does your family fly fish? Not to cut off the Mitchy Fishy.
No, that's a good question. So my wife has fly fish with me before we got married, and sort of an early aspects of when we were married. She hasn't for the last number of years. I have a lovely son and daughter, and my son enjoys fishing. He doesn't count the bug. He fishes with us. He can kind of take it or leave it. He enjoys it, but my daughter has the passion for it. She one of her requests for her birthday not too long ago, a couple years ago, was a fly rod kit. So
That's amazing.
She has a Reddington rod kit. She has her own waders.
Awesome.
She has her own fly boxes. She has her own vise. She has her own bobbin, and she ties her own flies.
That's wicked.
Yeah, so she comes with me a bit more than the other members of the family. But yeah, we all fish together. We try to as much as we can.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's cool.
Awesome.
One more. Little
Fishy
note.
Fishy 6.
No. Just one little note.
Yeah.
Just because you do work with Ontario Out of Doors. Are you fly fishing more than anything else? Like, are you how much, like, in terms of percentages, are you fly fishing most? Do you do any gear hunt, or do you do any hunting? Do you do any gear fishing, or is it just mainly?
Yeah, so I enjoy all aspects of the outdoors when it comes to hunting and fishing. I do fish more than I hunt. I hunt. I love upland game hunting. If I had to pick, if you're going to Mitchy's hunting one,
Yeah.
it would be
Mitchy's hunting.
Yeah. I enjoy waterfowl hunting, but and small game hunting. I turkey hunt. But if I had to pick one, it would be upland hunting for probably grouse and woodcock.
Yeah.
I enjoy that a lot, and it sort of overlaps with my steelhead season, so I don't do it as much as I'd like to.
Yeah.
Right.
But the one good thing talking about upland hunting is that generally sometimes that can be an escape from some of the crowded urban steelheading, because you get into the woods in central and northern Ontario, and it's you and your buddy and your dog and a shotgun and some shells and taking them for a walk, and that's a lot of times you spend a whole day, and that's all you see, and flushing grouse and woodcock and having a good time. I like the camaraderie.
That sounds pretty fun.
There's a lot of parallels you can draw to it, because it's I like a lot of aspects of hunting where you can talk and you can walk and you can share. I don't like sitting down. I don't like sitting in a tree stand. Nothing against people that like sitting in a tree stand. I just don't like some of the passive aspects of hunting. I like the footwork. I like walking. I like talking. I like the camaraderie and the aspects of, sitting in a turkey blind, watching the sun come up and the world come alive and around you. It's a pretty incredible sight, but not always having to whisper and not being able to say things and stuff like that. It kind of drives me a bit crazy because you're like, hey, did you see that? Oh, right? And so so I do hunt, and I do I fish conventional tackle too. I fish, although I fish lakes for bass and pike and fly fish for that, and even walleye fly fish for as well too. Sometimes it's just not practical, and then sometimes it's just doing something different. So I do fish smallmouth. I love fishing for smallmouth and largemouth bass. I fish for pike and muskie a little bit on terminal tackle. And then obviously when you're trying to get some food to eat, crappie and walleye are two of my favorites. So
So,
Oh man,
I can
walleye.
agree to that.
Oh man, walleye is right. Yeah.
So good.
So good.
No, there's something really cool about hunting, like upland, like you said, grouse and woodcock. Like that sounds so awesome.
The imagery is always like
In the fall too. Like fall is a great time for you then, eh?
Yeah, and it's a good nexus for. There's a lot of flying anglers seem to gravitate towards usually either bow hunting because it's sort of a bit more engaged and involvement, sort of bringing to the sport of bow hunting, or upland hunting. I don't know if it's just sort of a historically sort of a New England sort of. Northeastern sort of Canada, North America sort of tie into all that sort of trout fishing, bird hunting, Atlantic salmon fishing, all that sort of stuff combined. I don't know if it's just the history of it or if it's just going back to a little bit of the snobbery of fly fishing where that sort of came from. It's true. It's not. I think the great thing about fly fishing nowadays in the last number of years, in the last decade or so, is that I think it's evolved so much that it's I think we've gone past that. When I was first started fly fishing, it's very possible to see somebody with an ascot smoking a pipe on a trout stream. Now it's
just Mitch.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Mitch. Yeah. Sans the ascot. I mean, we'll get him one.
But then I have a thing called Mitchie's Fishies 5. So I see what you're saying.
Right, but nowadays you have the chances of seeing somebody wearing an ascot smoking a pipe on a trout stream is you're way more likely to run into somebody with a pair of Beats headphones on, plugged into their iPhone and tuned out of what they're doing.
It's true. It's weird how it's developed, eh? Like I wonder why it's gone that way.
It's just I
accessibility
guess accessibility, evolution of everything, right?
And it's cool. That's cool. So I guess it's just moved from that.
Yeah.
Some people just love music. Yeah. Like constantly having that there. I mean, I remember when when you first got your Discman or whatever, I was like always had headphones on. Now if that seems insane to me.
Yeah. I would. This is my personal thing, but I wouldn't listen to music on the river.
Oh no, definitely
I've
not.
never.
No, I've never and never will.
Never will.
Yeah.
It's just sort of sensory deprivation in a sense. That way, right? Like I couldn't. No.
I couldn't. Yeah.
Well, what's nice is walking to work and listening to music. It adds to that commute, that experience. But when you're on the river, you want to hear the birds and the water and the wind and everything else, right?
Yeah, I've never, but it's just an aspect of how things. I've never done it, but it's just an aspect of how things have changed and evolved. Right?
Yeah. Yep. Mitchie's Fishies 5, the last Mitchie's Fishy. I just came up with this one today. I don't know if it's stupid or not. I think it's kind of cool because there's so many different fly patterns, and I think if you've got such a vast background in fly fishing and fly tying as well, and all of that world, you probably know tons of patterns. But if there was a fly pattern you could pick that represented you as an angler or person, what would that fly pattern be?
Wow.
Whoa.
It's kind of cool, right? Because I wrote it, I was
right,
like,
that is stupid.
I know.
No, I'm kidding. That's a good question. I'm kidding.
It's kind of cool.
No, it's cool.
Yeah.
No, I like that. Whoa, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Don't use it again.
I think these will be like the standard Mitchie's Fishies 5s we can keep for everybody instead of just coming up with them randomly.
You normally don't anyway.
No.
Anyway, okay.
Anyways.
Fly pattern.
Yeah, what fly pattern would you pick that represents you?
That's a tough one on a number of levels because am I going for the name of the pattern or am I going for the actual
the look of it?
The look of the pattern, right?
Oh, does it have to look like you?
No, but just like
the feel, right?
the feel of it, yeah,
Oh,
like
okay.
the pattern, like, and maybe it's something in the history of the fly or where it comes from or the way it looks or what you fish with, what you catch on it or the way it acts in the water or
Yeah.
anything.
It's a good question. Yeah. And plus it's, I think how I look at fly patterns a lot of times too, is that I try to have a foot in both worlds of like the sort of traditional. I really love the history and everything, the culture that came with fly fishing and all the people that have gone before me and created patterns and stuff like that. But I'm also very excited about, what's going on now, like what's how, the synthetics and
the new patterns people are
everything
making.
that's coming out.
Articulated flies are like my new favorite thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what is that fly fishing, right? And all those sort of questions
Yes.
that come with it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's and I think, not to get off topic, but I am sort of stalling a little bit here, but
It's all good.
I think that with technology, especially with technology, whether it's the social media aspect of the technology of fly fishing, or whether it's the rods, the reels, the lines, the technology, and the sharing of information and patterns and that stuff, fly fishing is going through a renaissance, a revolution to some extent, but it also gets into sort of like an identity crisis at the same time too, right?
Yeah.
Because everything is becoming possible and able. And then, what is it? Is it still fly fishing, right? Of all these things going off in different tangents. We're talking about articulated flies, and you could talk about
Tenkara.
you could talk about Tommy Lynch's Drunken Disorderly. You can talk about
The mop fly caused a ruckus.
yeah,
Yeah, the mob fly.
Yeah.
Game Changer and stuff like
The squirmy worm.
yeah. So is it fly fishing because you have a fly rod, fly reel, fly line?
They're using a soft bait fly,
Is it
essentially.
fly fishing? Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's really exciting times now to be a fly angler, and some people don't care. Like, I mean, I was just talking about this with a friend down at getting back to IFTD about the changes in things and in trends, and it's like before there used to be a lot of silos, right? There used to be, for lack of a better term, silo fishermen. So you're a trout fisherman, you're a fly fisherman for trout, right? You were a steelhead fisherman for steelhead fly fishermen. You were a warm water fisherman and stuff like that, right? And a lot of that stuff sort of merged. People started doing more multi-fishing stuff, and then now people, you were either a float fisherman or a terminal tackle fisherman or a fly fisherman. And now a lot of that stuff, there's so much crossover. You have, warm water fishermen, terminal tackle that are getting into fly fishermen. You have a lot of other people getting into fly fishing, and some people really care and want to learn more about the history and involvement and all that sort of stuff. And some people just don't care, right? And not in a negative way. It's just like, it's not their thing.
Yeah.
They just came to fish.
Yeah.
They're not concerned about
They're not thinking
all
about
the
it.
other, all the baggage and accoutrements that come with it. They just want to fish, right?
Yeah.
And you can call me a fly fisherman. You don't call me a fly fisherman. I don't care. I just want to fish.
Yeah.
And today I'm going to pick up a bait caster, and tomorrow I'm going to pick up a fly rod, and the next day I'm going to pick up a spinning rod, and the next day I'm picking up a double-handed rod. So I don't really care what you call me. I'm just going to fish, and there's something kind of cool about that too. But it's just
both sides of the fence. There's something interesting too in the conversation around what fly fishing is.
yeah.
For sure, of course, that's an interesting conversation.
It's conservation, in my mind. That's what fly fishing is to me.
Yeah.
It's making sure you're good with the environment. You're doing the right thing. That's what it is to me.
I will say I've never met anybody that gets more upset than you when you like break off on a fish or whatever. Not because you've lost the fish, but because you've somehow done harm to the fish,
Yeah.
and that there's still a hook in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was like, you were beside yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other day on the credit, you're like, oh my god, what's gonna happen?
It'll
I'm like,
come out.
I don't know. It'll probably come out.
It is a shitty feeling though.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
but I've never met anybody that is upset as much as you do.
Sensitive man.
But what fly pattern would you pick there, Ray?
So
Ray's over here.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. I mean, I could go with a Catskill dry fly pattern just because of the kind of cool history of it, or a cut wing done from Pennsylvania. I could talk about. I think about, maybe a fully dressed Green Highlander or a Jock Scott or something like
I like
that.
that.
Oh, that's
I
cool.
like
That would be kind
yeah.
of cool
Yeah.
too.
That's cool.
Or you could do something really cool like a modern steelhead pattern, like a Lady Gaga or something like that.
Yeah.
Because there's some pretty cool stuff going on, right?
I think
some
when I
really
look
cool
at you, Ray, when I look at you, Ray, I see a bright pink popsicle.
Yeah, maybe. Orange.
Yeah.
But if I had to, I think, you know what, it's one of those things like Mitchie's Fishies one, like what I think that was one, the fish species. So it could be changing. It would change every day. I think if I had to say one now, it would just be a simple strip leech. I think just because it's just very simple, and it works and it does what it is. It's just very straightforward, and that's it is what it is, right? I think I wouldn't be a woolly bugger, but I have this theory that a lot of fly patterns are just sort of different people's perspective and take on being a woolly bugger.
That's
You're
pretty
right.
fair.
It's the Big Mac of flies, right? It is. It's just one of those things that you could very well tie on a saltwater hook and catch a tarpon on it. You could tie on a downsized and catch, panfish on it. You could fish for steelhead for sacrilegiously. You could fish for Atlantic salmon with it. You could fish for a bass with it. You could fish for anything with it. It's one of those patterns that just. I could do anything. It would not be a woolly bugger. I would not, for Mitchie's Fishies 5, it would not be a woolly bugger. But it's just one of my theories that that a lot of fly patterns out there are just sort of different people's different interpretations.
But just a simple.
It'd just be about a 4-inch piece of black rabbit strip leech on a tube.
I think that's super cool.
Yeah.
On a tube.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a little modern flair in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I think that's cool.
Yeah.
I think that's a really great answer.
But I think getting into fly patterns too, one of the things that have interested me too, and I've talked to Joe about it as well. And I think I wrote something for his blog a number of years ago, is in talking about fly patterns. It says one thing that really intrigues me, and I talk about having feet in both worlds of the sort of the traditional world of fly fishing, whether it's coming from trout patterns and classic catskill flies or Atlantic salmon hairwing flies and featherwing flies, and what's going on now with a lot of synthetics and rabbit strips and in rubber legs and all that sort of stuff, is that people look at the sort of the classics as like a staid sort of thing, right? Like they're the classics. There's what everything is being based off of or built from. But those guys that were developing that stuff, those guys who are tying catskill type flies, or who are doing cut wing thorax ties for Spring Creek trout in Pennsylvania, those guys that were tying the green Highlanders and the Jock Scotts and all that sort of stuff, those guys weren't traditionalists. Those guys were experimental, right? Those guys weren't saying, I'm going to tie this because it's traditional, right? Those guys created that stuff because they were trying to be on the cutting edge. They're trying to get their leg up. They're trying to improve and advance, right? And it's only now from this perspective of a more modern age that we're looking back at that stuff and saying, well, it's more traditional.
That's the traditional stuff.
That's the safe, storied way of doing things, right? Which is to somewhat true.
Well, just because it's been around for so long, right?
Yeah.
But those guys were the cutting edge, right?
Yeah.
Those guys were the guys that were pushing the envelope, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Those guys were the guys that were thinking and creating and coming up with kind of new things. Now, instead of, one of the criticisms could be that instead of, Kelson or any of those guys that were coming up with those patterns, instead of coming up with thinking out of the box and creating different salmon flies on tubes and shanks and with different materials than toucan and bustard and all that sort of stuff, they should have been thinking of expanding those patterns and those creating different, completely out of the box sort of styles of things, rather than just adding different colors to feathers and repeating the same process of having more or less identical fly patterns with just some different body wraps and some different winging and stuff like that. But that's always I've always find that sort of an interesting aspect to look at the evolution of fly patterns or where they came from, is that a lot of people look at that sort of stuff as very storied, very staid and true and historical things. And that's always been a draw to me. But those guys that were doing that stuff were doing it not because they wanted to be staid or they're doing it because they wanted to find new ways of, they wanted to add new colors, add new patterns, add new ways of tying in wings and hackling flies and doing that stuff because they wanted to edge up. They wanted to push and evolve. They didn't want to be staid. So I think a lot of those guys would be really excited by what's going on nowadays. Probably really, really frightened at the same time too.
Probably.
Yeah.
What the hell is
synthetic material?
What did I create? When did I start?
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, I have in my steelhead box, I have skating flies and damp flies and traditional full feather wing flies, but I also have stuff with rabbit strips and synthetics and, dare I say, rubber legs and things like
Yep.
that, you know.
Of course.
But it's about the whole experience, right? And I don't try and live in one world all the time. It's fun to
can't.
travel around with.
Yeah,
it.
I'm the same. Yeah, we're the same.
No, I think that's really. I mean, those are great. Mitch's Fishies 5
Mitch, what are you?
fly pattern.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jesus.
because you just made this up.
Probably a blob.
Oh, God.
No, I don't know. I think I agree with what you're. I think there's something nice to be said about. Honestly, when you're talking about the woolly bugger, it was like, yeah, like that does feel like a nice fly, sort of, to represent. I think us, because what we I think are trying to do is just like experience as much as fly fishing as possible, and when we talk about being the general fly fisher, the pulled back fly fisher that experiences sort of everything as much as you can, take it all in terms of fish, and there's
Right.
we have our limits, but it's like, I think, like you said, the woolly bugger is the most, just you could do anything on a woolly bugger, and it's sort of like we kind of, I think, want to just do anything and everything we can in the fly fishing world and experience it all. So I think that's just a good pattern to represent SoFly in a way, but it's also the woolly bugger,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to say like a Durham Ranger or something like that. That'd be great, but or Green Highlander, like you said, or the Jack Scott would be great. But what about you, Aldo? What's your fly? You're the blob too, aren't you?
Oh,
boy.
we're all being a blobby
a bunch
boy.
of blobs.
Just a bunch of blobs. I don't know.
It's a tough one.
It's tough because I was
I was thinking the clink hammer.
yeah.
Yeah,
I like fishing emergers.
yeah,
I fish them the least out of anything.
yeah.
But this is the thing I enjoy fishing the most. I
Clink
like
hammers are
emerger patterns. It always works for me.
I don't know. It's a tough.
You'll know, what are you?
Because are you thinking like is
Is it supposed to look like me? Is it what I use
Right.
the most?
Yeah.
Is it?
it
yeah.
a cool name? I was thinking more or less of
Yeah,
some
the
pretty
name
cool
too,
names
right?
are there, or is
Yeah,
it just like what the pattern looks like, or is it just our historical sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
For me, it's a cool name. I'd say Klauser because I just like saying it with a German accent.
Klauser.
I
yeah.
can see you as a Klauser.
Yeah,
That's
you-
a very
yeah.
I never
Yeah.
really
I'm always on
said
my
it
back.
with a Germanic accent, but yeah, that's a pretty good one to throw in there.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
Klauser.
Say Z Klauser.
that's true. No, it's true. Yeah, I think it's interesting because fly patterns, I think, like, can represent people however we want them to. It can look like them. It's based on your history, how you fish, what name you like, anything, right? Like, I think it's a cool thing. And it's just like a fly patterns, like you say, they're designed by the people that fish them, right? And they can be as technical or as, creative and inspired as people want them to be, right?
Yep.
So, like, in a way, flies sort of represent,
You're like a little bushy little royal wolf. I don't know.
Oh,
like
I'd love to be a royal wolf.
tumbling through the tumbling through the
Or an Osable.
Adirondacks.
I would pick the Osable wolf.
Okay.
That's probably what I picked.
That's one of my favorite wolves. I've had the
Yes.
wolf. That's one of my
Yes.
I love it. And I love fishing the Osable region and the
Oh,
Osable
yeah,
River
yeah.
and just upstate New York in general.
Yeah. That's a special place. That's a special place for me in my heart of hearts.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Yeah, a
There's so
little
many.
tumbling down, little pocket water, Mitch. Oh yeah, that's you for sure.
Oh, man, we got to get back upstate.
That's
oh,
some
my
fun.
God.
That's some fun water to fish too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
A lot of that pocket water is really fun.
Yeah. Again, we grew up in Ottawa, so those were our
bit
trout
closer, yeah.
streams.
Salmon and the Chattagay and,
Right.
yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that.
The Osable. Oh,
Yeah,
man.
the Shadow Gate. Yeah.
I love the
cut
Osable
my
River.
teeth on the Shadow Gate.
Oh, the Osable, same. Like, oh, my God.
Yeah.
Something about,
Yeah,
like...
I met Fran when I was probably
Fran Better, yeah.
when I was probably about I'm trying to think, maybe I think the first time I met him was probably about 14 or so when we were going down there, and then when I was probably 17, 18, went with one of my friends worked at the old Skinner's shop in Toronto, and we did a road trip. We went down and camped. We camped there, and then we went down into Vermont. And
Oh
then
my
we
God.
camped down the Battenkill and came back up through there.
Awesome.
And just going in Fran's shop, and he was kind of curmudgeonly. And
Yeah,
crusty
yeah,
and all that sort of
definitely, yeah.
stuff. But he was a character, right? It's some of the beautiful things there
Yes.
was, and the beautiful thing about some of those guys back then, there was not a lot of beige, right? Like there wasn't this homogeneousness to it, right? Every place you went, everything you had, people had their own sort of, they were their own individuals, and he had some great stuff, and
Oh, yeah.
his materials were the best, and his flies were the best, and all that sort of stuff. And he
Yeah, I
had
went
some
by a
kinda
shop
cool
once.
stuff.
So
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And that's fun water to fish. That's another one of those places, like we were talking about before, is just that it's fly fishing culture, right? When you're in there, they're not when you talk about fishing, it's just understood that you're talking about fly fishing
Yeah,
for trout,
yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
there's not, that's what fishing just becomes
it's
generic,
exciting.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's some beautiful. I love that pocket water. Caught a lot of fish in that river. Never caught a lot of big fish in there, but I think some of the bigger fish we got were in some of the flatter water outside of the gorge and that. But it's just it's some lovely
Man,
stuff.
I remember being in a trico hatch by the ski jump there in Osable, and it was the most frustrating moment of my life. I had like brook trout and some browns like just bumping into me and like just bouncing off my legs, and I only had like an 18 black ant pattern, and I just couldn't stick one. I was like, I remember just freaking out. I was like gonna lose
I
it.
didn't have anything small
And then
enough.
I slipped actually, and I sort of cracked the bamboo
Oh no!
rod, and I was like, oh, it's just the worst day.
Frustration after frustration.
But also great.
See, you're a tumbling
Memory.
little wolf.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a great region. Ray, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. This has been fun.
It's been so
Yeah,
fun.
thanks. Yeah.
And like we said, like there's so much stuff we could talk about. Like it'd be great to have you on again, and like we could just go on about one thing forever, you know?
Yeah, we
So-
do Mitchie's Fishies 6 to 10 or
Yeah.
6 to 20.
Mitchie's Hunt, because Mitchie's
Yeah.
Mitchie's Fishies 100.
Oh, there's just so much to talk about. There's
There
just,
is.
You know,
It's so much to learn.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
because I don't read.
Oh,
You should read.
Yeah, I shouldn't.
but we should do one up on
We should.
on the Tree River. Or up
Yeah.
on, fishing for
I think we will.
grayling. I'm all over that.
I think it'd be awesome.
Okay, let's do that.
Although,
Fish all
Let's
day.
Start planning.
Let's
Late at
let's
night,
make that
we
happen.
do a
have that
podcast.
crackling fire.
Hell
going
yeah.
on.
Oh,
We
yeah.
just
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Probably run an app for that somewhere. On.
Oh yeah, we'll just patch it through.
Yeah.
Sound really good.
Exactly.
Thank you so much again for coming on. And if there's anything you want to say, parting words about Ontario Outdoors, or anything else you want to leave with the listeners out there, or anything you want to say about fly fishing.
Yeah, no. It's the shameless magazine plug again. We're 50 years young this year, 2018. We just launched a new app for the digital edition. So go to the App Store or the Play Store for Android users and for your smartphone or tablet, or go to digital.ood.mag. Let me do this one more time.
Yeah.
digital.oodmag.com on your browser or desktop and find out more, and or oodmag.com and find out for subscriptions, or ofh.org to become an OFH, Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters member, and get Ontario Outdoors as part of your membership.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll put that in the show notes too, so if you can find a link down in the description. And although, what about social?
Oh well, yeah. Thanks, Ray, for coming on. It was great. I met you at Drift at one time, but it's great to actually get to chat. So it was awesome. Thanks for coming on. As always, you can find us at the SoFly Crew on Instagram. You can reach out to us at the SoFlyCrew@gmail.com with any questions, comments, concerns, or guest suggestions. We've been starting to actually get some guest suggestions, which is great because we get to meet more people and hear about different little stories from in and around Ontario, and that's what we're all about. I think that's it for me. This is Aldo signing off. Thanks for listening, and thanks again, Ray.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and that's it for me, Mitch. Yilma?
Yeah, that's it for me. And remember, folks, pick up a book, read, learn about this stuff, or just listen to our podcast
Yeah.
like I do.
Yeah, I guess that's a good little PSA. And I guess that's the last...
Just read. I don't know how, but
and that's the last episode of SoFly, because Ray's going to send his lawyers on us, and his blog is going to keep it. So next time we'll be called Fly Boys.
Yes.
I don't know. That's kind of cool, right?
Fly Boys, get hooked.
And that's it. Thanks a lot, Ray, again.
No problem. My other thought, I had to come up with an idea for my digital editor at the time said I have to come up with a name for my podcast. So I'm like, throwing all these ones around. So my second one was Blood Knot. So that
Blood Knot's pretty cool.
So maybe I should have went that way. And
Blood Knot's pretty cool.
We wouldn't have this. We wouldn't have it, but she didn't like it. So
I don't know.
So I came up with
Blood Knot for a podcast would be really cool.
I think people that aren't immersed in fly fishing don't understand what Blood Knot, like it's kind of like what does that have to do with fly fishing? It seems very like MMA or something like that, right? You're gonna have Conor McGregor on your show or something like that.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
But it's
That's a good imagery, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Blood Knot.
Amazing.
So,
This week on Blood Knot.
so maybe we could co-brand the Blood Knot and do something else.
I think that sounds rad.
Up on the Tree River.
Yes.
Done.
All right.
Cool.
See you soon, Plumber's Lodge.
All right. We're coming.
All right. Thanks for listening. Bye.